Welcome to Blueprint for Life, the podcast designed to encourage, uplift, and challenge you on your journey. In just a moment, we will be joined by our host, Elder Lawrence McCarter. We are thrilled you are willing to join us on this transformational ride. At Blueprint for Life, we believe each of us has a unique blueprint crafted by God Himself. This podcast will explore how to discover and unlock that blueprint, allowing you to live a life of purpose, fulfillment, and joy. Through insightful conversations, thought-provoking interviews, and biblical truths, we will delve into the keys that can unlock your potential. Together, we will navigate the challenges, setbacks, and triumphs that come our way, always relying on the timeless wisdom found in God's Word. Now, let's get started with this episode of Blueprint for Life. Here's Elder McCarter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Blueprint. It is I, once again, Lawrence, your host for Blueprint for Life, and I am glad to be back. It is always a pleasure to be with you, to sit down, to chop it up, to go through just some of my experiences, your experiences, just to share with you some of the things that I've been through, seen, and to also just break down what it is that I believe that God has for each one of us. I believe very firmly that God has a unique plan for each one of us, and that it is His desire that we, all of us, live lives that are blessed, that He would desire that we should, all of us, be blessed, that none of us should have to endure some of the things that we have had to endure. But unfortunately, there are some things that we have to deal with as we go through our lives, and the things sometimes it's just unavoidable. But as I still believe that we are still able to go through life and be blessed. And it's not about every day being sunshine and rainbows and puppies and kittens and all that stuff. And it's not about the prosperity gospel that some people have heard and tend to believe in, because the idea that everything is just going to go your way or anything like that. No, I'm not about that life. What I do believe, though, is that it is God's plan that we be blessed, and that He has a unique plan for each one of us, and that He has a direction for us to go in, and that if we would follow the direction that He has for us to go in, that we would be pleased with His destination for us, that we would enjoy the journey far more than the drudgery that we sometimes go through in our lives. But I like to approach the Bible from a plain standpoint, not getting into the super theological or anything like that, but to just make it plain, because quite frankly, we, all of us, live in the real world, and we have to approach things from the real world standpoint. We, all of us, have our own issues. We, all of us, have our own things that we deal with on a daily basis. We're real people with real issues, with real problems, with real life circumstances. And I believe the Bible has answers for those real issues, those real things. So rather than try to sit back and act all prophetic, some people do, and rather than sit back and point fingers like some people do, no, I would much rather just break down the scripture and show you what God's intent is for your life and my life, and show how it is that He designed this thing from the very, very beginning, so that each of us could follow this blueprint that He designed from before the foundation of the world, so that we could be blessed. All right? Without further ado, I want to talk about a topic that I think each one of us is familiar with to one degree or another. And that topic is disappointment. Okay? I think each one of us is familiar to a degree, at least, with disappointment. Okay? Disappointment is tough. All right? Generally, you only ever feel disappointed by something close to you. And honestly, I think that's why it can hurt you so much. A situation that ends in disappointment can only do because you were emotionally invested in it. It's the same thing with a person. You can only be disappointed in someone if you were emotionally invested in them. And even then, potentially dependent on them for some reason. Case in point, if you're trying to get to work and you asked somebody to pick you up to take you to work, you would only be disappointed in that individual for not showing up if you were dependent on them. And if you, in fact, had in your mind that they were dependable and you had the expectation that they were going to show up. But if you asked somebody that you didn't think they were going to show up in the first place, and they ultimately did not show up, if they fit your expectation and did not show up, you wouldn't be disappointed. Because why? That fit your expectation. So you wouldn't be disappointed. It's what they do. So you would have already made other arrangements in order to accomplish what it is that you needed to accomplish. So there wouldn't be no disappointment there. You just, whatever. But you would get disappointed if you're emotionally invested or dependent on them for one reason or the other. Okay. And I think that's why it's so easy for us to become cynical. We can become cynical towards each other, our political system, our system of policing, and even just the world in general. We can become cynical because once upon a time, we were genuinely emotionally invested in things working out the way we were told that they were supposed to work. And then that failed to happen one too many times, and it broke our hearts. Look at our political landscape right now. So many people are broken up about how our politics don't really function, but most people are so cynical about our political landscape. Why? Because we've seen it not work the way it's supposed to work so many times that now everybody's just like, whatever, I'll just vote for the lesser of two evils. But once upon a time, people were actually invested in one party or the other. Well, they were invested in their candidate of choice, and they actually followed the policies that these candidates and these parties champion. And as a result, they actually followed these candidates and these parties, but it came to a point where these candidates and these parties and these individuals, they broke their promises too many times, and it became such a massive problem that people became cynical about it. Or why do you think so many African American people have such a cynical perspective on policing in America? It's because for such a long time, there was two criminal justice systems. There was criminal justice for us, and then there was criminal justice for everybody else. There was policing for us, and then there was policing for everybody else. And other communities could see policing for their community and would assume that it's like that for everybody. But then for the African American community, we would see policing that happened in our community and wonder why nobody else noticed it. And as a result, over time, we became incredibly cynical about policing in general. And it's come to the place now where you have movements like the defund the police movement that generally finds a lot of support in certain sections of the African American community, but is vastly misunderstood in other communities because of the vast difference in how policing has been affected or has been treated within different communities. But the point I'm making is you have to consider how all of these various changes have been affected or have affected the cynicism of individuals because, look, at one time, either individuals or communities were actually emotionally invested in things working the way they were supposed to work. And then it failed one too many times. And we became cynical about it because it broke our hearts. But I believe that there's a way to come back from across the line of broken cynicism that some of us have found ourselves on the other side of, and a way to manage not to let it break those who have remained unbroken. And I believe that the method to doing that is to adjust our perspective and manage our expectations. Okay. Again, let me say that it's the method to doing that is to adjust our perspectives and manage our expectations. Now, you might say, Lawrence, man, what are you talking about? Unfortunately, we look for things to be a particular way. We have set in our minds that things are supposed to be a particular way. But in many occasions, the way that we think it's supposed to be does not necessarily always line up with reality. Now, I have already established my position, I think several times over, that according to Romans, the 3rd chapter, 23rd verse, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. At this point, I am going to ask that you accept by faith in Jesus Christ that this is true, partially so that I can avoid spending the next 30 minutes or so explaining this position, and partially so that I can continue on with the subject at hand. But feel free to post a question in the comment section if you would like to know more, and I would be more than happy to do a podcast or to do any other type of explanation, video, whatever, what have you. It doesn't matter. I'll be more than happy to break down that methodology for you so that you gain a better and more complete understanding of why I say and why I believe that Romans 3:23 is absolutely correct in saying that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But my main reason for reminding you of this simple fact, and this is something that I want you to keep in mind, is that not only have we sinned, but we have a nature that is inundated, submerged, and immersed in sin, which makes us incapable of doing or participating in anything truly pure of our own will or personal volition. In other words, as Paul put it in Romans, the 7th chapter, 19th verse, for I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Here's my blanket statement for all of the disappointment you've ever felt or will feel toward your fellow man, to which I will try to expand on the course of our time together, but here it is. Don't take it personal. Just like you can't get it right, they can't either. Because the reality of it is, we've all sinned. We're all sinners. We all have a sin nature. By our very nature, we're incapable of getting it right. I don't know how to make this any clearer by our very nature, like the thing that establishes who and what we are and how we function, the essence of who we are incapable of living a perfect life. None of us are perfect. None of us, not a single one of us, are capable of being perfect. So I don't know what to tell you. And as a result of none of us being perfect, you're going to have to wrap your mind around the fact that if you're not perfect and nobody else is perfect, then everybody has got some stuff that they're trying to work through, which makes them just as susceptible to messing up as you. Can I get away with saying that? That's my blanket statement there. Don't take it personal, because the reality is, just like you mess up, other folks mess up. Just like you need grace, they need grace. Just like you need forgiveness, they need forgiveness. We owe each other a lot of forgiveness and grace on a daily basis. On a daily basis. Because we all mess up on a regular basis. On a more than regular basis. We spend more time messing up than we do getting it right. It's important for us to extend each other some grace. Because let's be honest, man, you can't even do yourself right all the time. Who's going to say you're going to treat your fellow man right all the time? All right. So now that I've got that out of the way, I want to shift focus slightly, because we still need to shift our perspective to deal with disappointment. And see, often I've heard people who experience disappointment personally, or they bear witness to some tragedy, and immediately they begin to question God because the situation didn't go the way they wanted it to, or it turns out in a way that they didn't expect it to. They now take issue with God over the outcome. How could God let this happen? Or how could a loving God let something like that happen? Or one of my personal favorites, what did I ever do to deserve something like this? With all of the school shootings that take place in this country annually, that seems to be a recurring question that gets asked. How could a loving God let something like that happen? And on the one hand, yeah, that's a reasonable question to ask, because yes, God is a loving God. He is a just God. He is a all-knowing God, an all-powerful God. So the question then becomes, how could he let something like that happen? But if you look at Isaiah, the 55th chapter, the 8th and 9th verse, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." You see, you got to understand that God's view and perspective is infinite, okay? His view and perspective is infinite. Ours is finite. God can see and control the entire timeline. We plan for years and hope to see the next second. You see the difference? You may be disappointed and feel like God let you or them down. You might even feel like you could have done a better job, but only God knows what blessing that moment of disappointment just purchased and paid for. I'm going to say that again. I want to make sure you catch that, because I don't want you to miss what it is that God has for you in that. Okay. You might be disappointed and feel like God let you or them down. You might even feel like you could have done a better job, but only God knows. Only God knows. What blessing that moment of disappointment just purchased and paid for. See, the issue that we have to deal with is the fact that you nor I knows what's going to happen down the line. I don't know from 1 second to the next what's going to happen. Sure, I have my rathers. I'd rather this happen over that. I would love for this to happen more than that. But I can't guarantee you from 1 second to the next that any particular thing is going to take place over anything else. And if I'm not careful, I'll begin to see myself as greater than God and have the expectation that I can control something that is in God's hands and that I can do better than God can when I lack the information that God has. Because you see, God knows the beginning from the end, and He knows what is going to happen and what decisions and choices and events will take place in this moment that will affect 5, 10, 20, 25 years down the line. There was a movie that came out, I think I was early on in my time in the military, called The Butterfly Effect. And it was basically how this guy's decisions affected his life in different ways, and the way that even seemingly innocuous decisions would change his life in drastic ways. And you can only imagine how, if we knew just how much or how big the changes in our lives could be affected by sometimes just small disappointments. Sometimes the small disappointments can have major effects on our lives later on down the line. But here we're getting mad at God about something small now, but it turns into a major blessing down the line. But here we're upset about something simple here now, and later on down the line, it's going to be a major blessing. But if it had never happened, we would not have, that wouldn't have been the launch pad that we needed.
Hey there, fellow listeners. As we wind down another inspiring episode of Blueprint for Life, we want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, you can always find more uplifting content and past episodes on our website, blueprintforlifepodcast.com, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Join us next week as Elder McCarter continues this impactful message, giving more insight into God's plan for your personal blueprint. Until then, stay blessed and keep shining your light.